hello. Welcome
Hello.
to
Hello.
Going Deeper.
Good evening.
Good evening. And hello to you guys who are watching. It's great to have you tuning in with us. Feel free to write your comments in the comment below. We've got a whole panel of people this morning. We've got Neil. Say hi, Neil.
Good evening.
Evening. We've got Daz.
Hello.
Or Daz J. You
Yeah.
basically sound like some sort of cool rapper or something?
That's exactly what I am.
Yeah. And we've got Helen as well.
Hi.
Hey. So yeah, we're going to go a bit deeper with our sermon series for September, which was Whole Life Worship. And the thing that connects all four of us is all four of us preached in this series. So it'd be good just to maybe go through what we talked about and just see any thoughts that we particularly had on our minds. I'll just say I've just made myself a hot chocolate with a church coffee machine, and it's not very nice.
Oh, no.
So I'm a bit disappointed. I haven't had one before, but
Sometimes it's those pods in it. Sometimes you get a duff one, I think, and the water runs through it weird.
Did you
Yeah.
shake it well? You got to give it a good shake before you
well,
put it
that's
in.
no good telling me now. That was the last one. So
Oh no, disaster.
and I was going to add some milk, but I ran out of time for the countdown. So never mind. But anyway, it's great to have you guys with us. And yeah. So Whole Life Worship, just to say, this was based on a book. Here's the book here called Whole Life Worship. Empowering disciples for the front line. Now, this is an LICC published book. LIC is London Institute of Contemporary Christianity, and they have a big thing about front lines. Can anyone explain to me what a front line is? Because it's something that's across all their material.
Good question.
The way I like to think of it is that it's around actually where do you spend the majority of your time that you aren't surrounded by Christians? So for me, it's work. And actually, I spend a lot of time with my colleagues who most of them don't love Jesus or and actually it's so there is my front line. Whereas for some people, it will be at the school gates, which mine is probably actually becoming slowly but surely. I probably see the mums at the school gates now more than I do my colleagues because I often work quite independently. And so actually it's, where do you spend a lot of your time that isn't around Christians?
That's a very good answer, Helen. I guess mine would probably be the school gate as well. The only problem is I don't talk to anyone. So that kind of ruins that front line thing. Neil, where would you say your front line is?
Where do I spend most of my time? Probably on the golf course, actually.
Yes.
Yeah. So meet lots of different people, and and we spend 4 hours playing golf. So there's plenty of chance to talk about anything, really. Yeah.
Have you had that opportunity, or are you waiting for that opportunity?
No, I have not regularly. As you get to know people better, so it becomes easier. But what I think surprises me is that how much people work out for themselves. So I don't tend to play golf, or hardly ever play golf on a Sunday. I do play the other 6 days of the week on occasions. And people suddenly notice you're not there Sunday. So when you might mention church or things Christian, people aren't surprised because a lot of the time they've worked it out for themselves.
Yeah, cool, good. And how about you, Dad? Daz, like me, you work in a church and for a church, so
front lines are tricky. I guess it's where my sort of faith meets the quote unquote the world, isn't it? The people who don't have a faith, and that will probably be in just friendships I have with people outside of my work. Things like going to the barbers, sitting in the barber's chair and talking to them.
I don't do that either. I'd just rather they didn't talk to me.
I quite like it when they don't talk to me, but sometimes they do, and I think, and it always, what do you do? And I say, I work for the church, and talk a bit about that with them. It'd probably be my sort of friendships outside. There's a climbing gym. I like to go climbing in a place like that, and sometimes I talk to people there about what I do, and it's inevitably either interesting to them or they just kind of glaze over and think I don't know how to speak to you anymore. Like you're an alien. It's quite fun.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, and I guess where the LICC material and the frontline stuff is this idea that we actually, in reality, spend very little time in church, we spend most of our time in our various front lines, be it work or home or whatever. And it's the same idea with the whole life worship, is that if we're narrowing the definition of worship down to that hour on a Sunday, then that's far too narrow a definition. And actually, worship should be part of everything we do, which I'm guessing isn't a new concept to you guys.
No, I remember writing we had to, as part of my degree, I went to Bible college and studied all sorts of things, but we had to pick an article from this big, huge book of articles. And we were given about 4 or 5 to pick from. One I picked was called, it was an article by a guy called John Piper, it's called, and the title was Mission Exists Because Worship Doesn't. And it's like quite controversial, like title, but then you read it, and his idea was, we send people off on these mission trips and to go and do mission out in the community, when actually all that we want to do is increase the worship of God. Like wherever we go, you don't have to go on a mission to do that. Like you can be doing that in every single aspect of your life. And so, I remember reading that and thinking, and it was quite revolutionary in my thinking about how I talk about mission, how I talk about worship, and not making them separate things, like they're the same. And that was like many years ago that I read that.
And yet we still call it the worship. We come to church to worship. We have the worship band. We're now going to worship together.
We still send people on mission.
Can we legitimately call it worship?
Yeah, I think there's a difference between a worship service and worship life. It's just one bit of worship, isn't it? So it is still worship what we do on a Sunday. It's just one bit of it, perhaps.
And I guess, the nearest parallel that I can find is right now, I am a mother. My son is asleep, but I'm still a mum. But when I'm hands-on with Noah, I'm still a mum, but I'm just more actively being mum. It's more obvious that I'm being mum. It's more, practical that I'm being mum. But the whole time, I am still mum. And so I guess that's a bit like worship. Actually, when we're out in the world, outside of church, which is still in the world, you know what I mean? Actually, when we're outside of that church building, actually, that is still worship. What we are doing there is still called to be worship, whether we do or not's another thing. But we are still called to worship that whole time. But when we come together and we have that gathered worship, it's not an elevated version, but it's that, because we did that previous series on Frontlines, which I really enjoyed, but it was about actually coming together to grow, to be scattered, and actually how do we do church as both?
So
and
let's
I think
talk
that
about
sort of links in.
Yeah, let's talk about that for the moment. If worship is a whole life, what is primarily Sunday mornings for? What do we think we actually go to church for?
I think, and this is off the top of Daz's head, I think Sunday mornings is about worshipping wherever we together. I think the togetherness is such an important part of what we do on a Sunday, because if my only intention is to worship God, then I could do that at home, or I could do that at work, or I'm always doing that, if that's the whole idea of the sermon. So I think there's something about the coming together of God's people that is the most significant part of what we do on a Sunday morning, I think. And that's the main. I think that's what we're doing is we're coming together to worship God, as His kind of family, as His chosen people, and all that stuff. That would be my answer.
Yeah. Neil, how about
I
you?
quite like the analogy of the gym. So
yes, I love that. I love that analogy that you used in your sermon the other week.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you go to the gym, and it strengthens you. It makes you better prepared for the week coming ahead. It's and all those sort of things. And I think you can translate that into church a little bit. That because we've been to church, we are better equipped. We're fitter and we're more trained and we're practiced, or whatever whatever you do in the gym, to go out to the the other 166 hours a week, whatever it is, because you've been to the spiritual gym, if that's a if that's
Yeah.
such a thing.
Yeah, see, that's that question. Do you go to the gym so you can do better at the gym, or do you go to the gym so you can do better in life? And Jenny says to recharge and community on Sundays, equipping us to continue our full life worship away from Sunday morning. So yes, I love that gym analogy. I'm thinking we should do something with that on our website.
Yeah, as long as you don't go to the gym. As long as you don't go to the gym.
No, you don't have to go to the gym. I like the analogy, not you have to go to the gym. Yes, that's my front line, but I don't talk to anyone there either. So I'm not doing very well at this whole frontline business, but never mind. Yeah, Helen, have you got anything to add to that?
No, I was going to say exactly the same as Jen, and I can see Helen Ruffhead agreed as well. And actually, it's all about coming together to be ready to go out. But also, you've got that huge actually benefit of learning from one another as well.
Yeah.
And actually worshipping together gives you a different insight, which, does, whichever side you're on, does referenced in his sermon. That actually, when we worship, we get a different insight. We can see what God's doing in a different way, and I think a lot of the time that comes from other people. I think God can often speak to us through other people, and so if I'm always worshiping solo, actually that's limiting ways that God can speak to me. So I think God speaks really commonly through other people, whether that be mates I meet on the streets, whether that be in a house group, whether that be at the climbing gym. But actually a huge place that has scope for that is on a Sunday morning in that church worship service, where actually, yes, from the people at the front who are leading services or preaching or leading the song worship, but actually also from those other conversations you get. I can often be really hit by something or going, oh, that's a really good point or whatever, or don't even notice it until so much later from just a conversation I'm having over a cup of coffee. Before or afterwards.
Yeah, and I must say there was some good cake at church this morning. It was a good, so that's an advantage to coming. Actually, I met a lady for the first time. She'd come to church maybe 3 or 4 times, and she'd come. She was a carer for one of our. We often get young people with learning difficulties come to church, and they bring along a carer who's sometimes never been to church before. It's all a bit of a shock to the system. But she'd come along. She didn't attend the church. But she had attended a church in the past, and she was doing, online church. You can access pretty much any service all over the world these days. But there's a big difference between watching something online and actually coming and being part of a community. And she was blown away by just being part of our church on a Sunday morning. And that's that togetherness, that learning from one another, that rubbing off different ideas and just sharing what maybe God has put in our heart, or God just speaking through us, is something that you can't really get from anywhere else in such a focused and intense way, I think.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. What I thought I'd do is just remind you what the different sermon titles were, and maybe you can put your hand up for the one that was yours. Okay, there was 5 this time, because there was 5 Sundays in September. So the first one was Worshipping Engages Our Whole Lives. That was my one. Second one was Worshipping Offers Us Fresh Insight.
That was
yes,
me.
That was you, Dad. It was a little while ago, but it was you. Can you just quickly give a quick idea of what that was about?
Yeah,
by the way, my one was about the fact that worship goes beyond that hour on a Sunday morning, which we've already been talking about. So your one was Daz?
Mine was all about perspective on life, and remembering that everything we do, we need to see it through the lens of Jesus is at the forefront. It's all for him and by him and to him that we do everything we do.
Good.
That's kind of the idea, I think.
Excellent. Thank you, Daz. And then we got
worshiping.
Oh, you had your
Jesus glasses on.
Yeah, everyone remembers that. They can't remember why you were wearing it. Yes. Everything through Jesus. Yeah, that was good. Yeah. The next one, number 3, was Worshipping Transforms Our Ordinary Actions. Neil, what was that one about?
I'm really glad I got that one. If I could have chosen one, that would have been the one that I do. Because as most people probably know, I'm not a great musician. Singing is not necessarily my favourite occupation, but I am quite an activist. I like to do things, and yes, so mine was to bring around the idea that worship involves. I changed it to attitudes and actions, and because we understand that God's love for us, that when we leave the building and do something, that our actions should and hopefully are changed in the way we show that God's love to others. So yeah, all around action.
Thank you, Neil. Number 4 was worshipping inspires our everyday speech. Helen, that was
me.
you. That was last week. So what was that about?
I basically disagreed with everything that Dad, aka Neil, said. No, I didn't. I complimented it.
There.
By saying that actually actions are super important, but so are our words. And actually that when we worship, it's actually what fills our heart comes out of our mouth. And so actually the more time we spend worshiping, the more time we end up being filled with God. So the more we bless others. And again, I changed it to inspires our everyday communication, because not everyone speaks.
No, yeah, and there's a reason for that, Helen's, because you are a
sign language interpreter.
Yes, so you have particular
and the deacon for accessibility and inclusion.
Yeah, so you're particularly sensitive to that sort of stuff. That was really, really good.
Yeah.
And then I had this morning, I spoke on the final part, which is worshipping focuses our wavering hearts, which looked at the church in Ephesus and Jesus's commendations, but also warning to them in Revelation chapter 2 that they'd lost their first love. And we were talking about love for God, love for each other, and love for the world, people out there on our front lines, as we've been talking about. And the idea that it's a process. Actually, we need to know that God loves us and have that relationship. That is then kind of worked out in our church context with that community that we are of Christians, and then that bubbles out into the community out around us, wherever that might be for the rest of the week, beyond that 1 hour that we spend at church. Right, I want you to share, each of you to share something that particularly struck you that wasn't in your sermon.
Oh, can I do one from today? Because
Dad, well done for getting in quick there.
I got to be quick. It was the sermon today. It was from Revelation, wasn't it? And it was there was a phrase. Jesus said something like, he talked about holding it against them, that they'd forgot that they'd forgot this sort of first love they had. And he said, the one thing I hold against you. And I thought that's quite a strong thing to say. Like, he holds it against them that they've forgotten this love, because they were doing quite well. It sounded from his description.
They were. This church sounded really good.
And I thought this is really important. Like, it's so important to Jesus that we are not just good and not just good people, that we are loving people, that we love each other, that we love express love in our community. And it really made me think, like, it might make him cross. Like, he really will be. It's such a negative weight to that phrase. Made me think, like, wow, he really takes this so seriously.
He said, I'll take away your lampstand if you don't get yourself sorted. It's like, oh dear.
Oh my goodness. So I found that really challenging. Made me think, like, am I always as loving as possible? Because it might be counted against me. Like, I don't know what that means, but it felt very serious. And I thought that I really want to make sure that I'm as loving as possible, because I think it upsets Jesus when I'm not. Yeah.
I've just realised how mean this question was, because I have to admit I'm struggling to remember any of your sermons.
So I thought about getting quick.
So maybe I could say you could do it from your own sermon. Hopefully, I'm going to struggle to remember my own, let alone anyone else's. But just anything. I'm throwing it out there. Try and make it as easy as I possibly can.
Yeah. Well, I just obviously panicked and cold sweat came out, but then I remembered. The passage that I think was from Daz's sermon from Romans, and I did the live stream this morning with Leslie, and Leslie read it from the Message, and for me this sort of sums up the whole series really. And if you don't mind me quickly reading it, It says, God says, so here's what I want you to do, God helping you. Take your everyday, ordinary life, your sleeping, eating, going to work and walking around life, and place it before God as an offering. Embracing what God does for you is the best thing you can do for him. And I I'm not usually a message fan, but that just sort of spoke to it. Is just embrace God and then get out there and live the life, do the actions, and probably say the right things as well. Whilst you're out there. So yeah, that's my one takeaway.
Yeah, thank you, Neil. Helen, have you thought of something?
I think not the only thing. Lots of things struck me through this series. But I think a theme that kept coming up.
Lots of things. I've got a whole list of things here that I could share, but just one thing.
I have a whole list of things here. I have the cheats book. But no, I think because it came up a few times, whether we named Martin and I can remember both named it, but I can't remember if Dad or Daz did. But around actually a lot of us, a lot of people live with that sacred secular sort of divide.
Yes.
And actually how much that's like our norm. And actually we've got our Sunday life and our Christian life and our Jesus following life and I'm hanging out with, other Jesus followers and how I am there. And then what I'm like at the school gate or in the office or these sorts of things. And actually, I think what was really nice about this series was that, and I mean this with love to all four of us, is that we all said things that were challenging, but I don't think there was a lot that was really new to it. Like there were new things, but this wasn't here is a lot of exegesis and here is a lot of new ideas and new things and whatever. But it was a really good reminder to a lot of people for a lot of things. Like I think a lot of people would have heard things they already know. Like, I don't know about you guys, but I had people come to me like, oh, I knew that, but it's so good to be reminded because actually I am still living these two separate lives. And every now and again, sort of like I'm really good at bringing them together, but there are still some places that aren't together. And I still have those areas that Jesus isn't. You know what I mean? In my life, whether intentionally or not, I haven't taken Jesus to those places. And so it's good to be reminded that actually I know I need Jesus in all aspects of what I do. And I need to take Jesus into all those places. So it's great to have that constant reminder to do that.
Yeah. Thank you, Helen. I guess for me, I'm going to cheat because I'm allowed to do that. And it's something that really struck Jen. So my wife, she shared on Friday, if any of you watched Friday Night Worship, she did a really, really good talk at the beginning of that around her struggles with being challenged by Helen's sermon last Sunday about the words that we speak. And she spent a day where at the end of the day, she was really concerned that she hadn't spoken in a way that was right, and she felt a lot of condemnation. And then she was reflecting on the Friday about actually God doesn't condemn us; He wants to work with us and help us to be the best version of ourselves that we can be. And that was a real challenge because I think you talked about, Helen, those verses where it says that from the heart the mouth speaks.
Yeah, and
therefore that's challenged that if I talk like that, what's that saying about what's in here? It's they talk about the Bible talks about the tongue being the tiller of the ship that steers, and and I've known people where I've said to them, you would be great if it wasn't for the things that you say, because you do so much good stuff and then you mess it all up by just saying horrible things. So that was my particular challenge by my wife. So that was good. Now, I've run out of questions. So anyone else want to ask a question of the rest of us?
I think the one thing for me, just whilst people might be typing in a question, is most people know I used to work for a bank, and we used to get sent on training courses. And you go on a whole day's training course, then you come back to your desk in the Monday morning or whatever. And if you changed one tiny thing, because of that training course, then that would have been a real success. Because most of the time you went to the training course, you heard it all, you nodded your head, agreed with it, then came back and did exactly what you did before you went on the course.
Yeah.
And I think the same goes for this series. It's been a brilliant series. As Helen says, probably not that much new, but the question is, will people change their lives just that one thing slightly differently? So they will spend more time with God. They'll come to church with a slightly different attitude. They'll be more careful how they use it, whatever it is. But so that's I suppose that's always the challenge, isn't it? After a sermon series, but that's my sort of real prayer, is that having heard it all, we will all do just one thing that tiny bit different, because God's moved in us in some sort of way. Yeah. I think
it's hard to turn that thought into an action, isn't it? I think that's the difficult thing to do. Because I came away from the service today thinking, what am I actually going to do that will help me to like rekindle that love that I have. And I remember thinking, before I open my emails at all this week, I'm going to do my Bible plan, make sure that happens first, then I'll do my emails. And that was like a helpful little practical, like, here's something I'm actually going to do to make a change. Because otherwise, like you say, it goes.
I like that analogy where they say that, you don't remember every meal that you've had, but they all add up to feed you and nourish you.
Yeah.
And I hope it's the same for sermons. Most people are not going to remember the sermons within a week or something like that, but hopefully it's drip feeding. It is literally feeding. That's such an important part of gathering together, feeding and shaping, that it strengthens us. Just say Helen Roughhead. She said, I found Helen's sermon the most challenging. Being autistic and impulsive, I'm always saying things I shouldn't and then hating myself for it. Who's ever done that before? Yeah. Unfortunately, not as often as I did in my 20s. I've got a little bit more control, but yes, it's unfortunately still an issue. And Jen, who I was sharing about a moment ago, said she loves this verse from Ren Collected's Boldly I Approach. Says, when condemnation grips my heart and Satan tempts me to despair, I hear the voice that scatters fear. The great I am, the Lord is here. So, yeah. So Helen, even if not you, Helen Roughhead, yes, you could feel pretty bad and hate yourself about saying wrong stuff, but there is no condemnation from God for that. So, yeah, how do I get rid of that?
Or from us either. There's no,
us. Well, unless you say it about us, obviously.
No, Martin.
No condemnation.
Still, as I say, we've all been there. We know what that's like. Yes, yeah.
Got one that says, that's why I prefer writing. You can edit it, but I can't see what it's written before. So,
yes, no, that's why he prefers to write rather than say things.
Speak.
Right, yes. Right, I get now. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. However, it's when you write that email, like when you get that email, you're like, oh, that's wound me up. I'm going to send off an email now. And you don't,
Yes.
That's why I always said, don't send an email on immediately. Send it the next day.
Sermon?
I didn't talk about not replying in haste, but I did say that written stuff is also included.
Right. Yes, you did.
I did talk about the fact that actually our texts, our emails, and all those sorts of things, actually, they have to be so conscious as well, which is why we need to be careful not to do those like impulsive texts.
And the thing about social media and internet and stuff like that, with that anonymity kind of built in, is that your words people can be really, really nasty and really horrible. They would never, ever do in real life, face to face. And that's that whole thing, that verse of from the heart, the mouth speaks, or the keyboard types. And actually that reveals what so often expectations and norms in society squash any things that we might say, but we just wouldn't, because we might get punched in the face. Actually, unfortunately, what people write on social media and internet is probably a true sign of what's in their heart. Yes, which is why people get into lots of trouble with stuff they put on the internet a few years ago, and it comes up in an interview. Ooh, So
well, even the other day, I was, going to and fro with a company that I shan't name, trying to get a refund on something that they hadn't delivered. And if I was actually in store, I'm like, oh, I know it's not your fault, or I'm, just trying to get to the bottom of this, and blah, blah, blah. But because I was doing it on web chat, like, well, that's not good enough. Where's my item or my refund, please? Blah, blah, blah. And actually, I was much shorter and sharper because I was on text than I would have been had I been in person. And I caught myself being like, oh, I'm being much sharper and much more blunt. Like the pleasantries had disappeared. If you know what I mean. So trying to find that balance. But also making sure that I got my refund.
Yes. See, I think out of probably the whole series, your one, Helen, is the one that practically is the most challenging. Because I think most of us don't go around hitting people or doing stuff like that, but our words can be a real issue. So I think, I mean, do people agree with that? Possibly, you can feel free to.
Yeah, I think so. I think particularly what you said about going into work and moaning about stuff. I think I heard a few people saying, "Oh, I'm definitely one for that," and I think people found that a helpful challenge. I know I work so hard anyway to not complain, not moan about things, but I'm like in my brain always thinking, "Oh, I'm so hard done by," or "This is so rubbish," or "That person's got so much better off than I have." And it's so nice, it's so helpful to be reminded. Actually, I can worship God in the way I speak, just to everybody all around. And not being a miserable, like road rage or that kind of thing. It's all that was such a helpful challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was chatting to someone who had a training this week just gone, and they were like, right, we're going to make sure that positivity and speaking kindly is one of the when you go to those work trainings and you have to start by setting ground rules like for how the training's going to go, and they made sure that sort of positivity and like that speaking kindly and looking positive around things was one of their ground rules. And what was really interesting was like as the days went on, the trainer kept going, this is like you're like the easiest group to train because actually normally I'm up against it because everyone's going meh the whole time. But actually you guys are on board, not because you're on board, but because you're thinking, okay, you're just trying to help, you're just trying to make things better. And actually it transformed the whole training for the whole team for the whole week, because someone had gone, should we try and be a bit more positive than we normally are for doing this? Should we try and speak a bit kinder and realize that actually everyone's intentions are good? No one's trying to make this more difficult. And everyone went, yeah, okay. And it sort of had that knock-on effect through the week.
And that's key, isn't it? That we're called to transform the space that we're in, that front line that we've been defining earlier. As Jesus followers, through our everyday worship, we bring transformation to the places and the spaces we find ourselves in. And I guess I think we're drawing our conversation to a close now. But unless anyone else has got anything they want to say, or there's some questions in the comment, is that actually whole life worship is about being Jesus in our lives, knowing that we're loved and loving others in return, and that brings real change, more so than many other things. And that's what's happening.
I was on a youth camp once, and someone was doing a talk, and they at the end of it they gave every single person a sticker, like a "Hello, my name is" sticker. But they all said, "Hello, my name is," and then we all filled in our names, as you do, like you do on a course. But it then said, "An ambassador for Christ." Because actually, everywhere we go, everything that we are doing, it's exactly that. We're taking Jesus into those places, and we are an ambassador for Christ. And so actually, it's making sure that our whole life is worship, because as you say, it affects those places that we go into, those places around us, as we take Jesus into them, which is what we're called to do. And so that is sort of really stuck. I mean, that was probably 15, 16 years ago. And I can still picture the sticker, that someone had handwritten every single one of them, sort of thing, and taken the time going, people might remember it more. But actually, they said, "Hello, my name is Helen, an ambassador for Christ." And I was like, oh, that's a real challenge. That actually everywhere I go, I'm wearing this sticker, not visibly, but actually everywhere I go, I am taking that, that name of Jesus with me. And so actually, am I speaking kindly? Am I doing nicely? Am I, looking at things through God's perspective and through how he's, what his idea and what his vision and what his want is for this place in this situation? Am I doing the same? Which was a real encouragement and a real challenge. Exactly.
Yes.
I'll attach it to the top of my glasses.
Yeah. Excellent. Anything else from you, Neil?
No, I think we've covered it.
We have. Yeah.
Need to go and live it now.
Yes. Yeah. That's anything from you, Daz?
No, I think it's cool, the story that Helen told about the person who went and made like positivity a big part of their like working day and successfully did what she. Because I remember you saying about people starting that negative spiral of like negative speech, and they managed to spin that around and start the positive spiral of positive speech. I think that's so cool and exactly the heart of like what we've been trying to talk about, isn't it? It's like if we can be the light of Jesus in the world, it will make a difference and transform that whole training experience. I think that's such a cool story. Love that.
Yeah,
really cool.
I'll tell you said that.
Yeah, I do.
Well, thank you guys for helping out this evening. Thank you also for your sermons as well, being part of this series. Thank you to you guys who have tuned in and given your time to watch and make your comments and ask questions. Just to say, if you've missed out on the series, you can find them all on our YouTube channel. Well, you can find it by searching Hawley Baptist, but I'm guessing you're on the YouTube channel because you're watching this. But do catch up because they're good. And if you want to look up LICC, London Institute of Contemporary Christianity, you will find loads of stuff there about worship and front lines and things like that. In fact, myself and Helen were talking about that, the fact that in December we are doing another LICC series on Christmas. So we're very much looking forward to finding out what that will be about. I'm guessing some of the same themes will come up. But yeah, thank you, everyone. Thank you, guys. Thank you for tuning in. God bless. Have a good week and go and live out that worship as best as you can. Cheers. Bye, everyone.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.